The sun rises over the blood-red fields of ancient Greece, its light glinting off broken shields and abandoned spears. The air still carries the echoes of battle cries that once shook the ground. Among the countless fallen, the victors stand silent, men forged in the iron discipline of Sparta. To the world, they are legends, warriors of unmatched skill, soldiers raised not merely to fight, but to embody war itself. Yet behind their unbreakable armor lies a society built on paradoxes, honor and cruelty, discipline and domination, pride and fear. In the aftermath of every victory, Sparta did not celebrate. Theirs was not the way of feasting or songs. Instead, they performed rituals of silence and remembrance, for every triumph carried a cost. But for those they defeated, the price was far greater. Entire cities were left in ruins, their men slain, and their families, wives, daughters, and children, were taken under Spartan control. What happened next would mark Sparta not only as warriors, but as rulers who imposed order through power and fear. Spartan society was built upon the principle of strength. Every male citizen was a soldier. Every moment of life was training for war. From the moment a boy was born, he was judged fit or unfit for survival. Weakness was not tolerated. This mentality shaped every decision they made, even in victory. When an enemy city fell, the Spartans viewed the conquered not as equals, but as instruments to sustain their state. Defeated men were often executed or enslaved, their lands were seized, and their families were absorbed into a system designed to feed the needs of the Spartan military machine. The women of defeated enemies faced an uncertain future. Sparta's laws treated them as part of the spoils of war, but not necessarily with random cruelty. The city-state's aim was strategic, to ensure stability, population control, and the continuation of labor and service. Many of these women became helots, state-owned serfs who worked the fields and provided food for the Spartan army. The helot system was the foundation of Sparta's power. While the warriors trained, the helots produced everything they needed to survive. It was a life of subjugation, marked by surveillance and harsh punishment for rebellion. Spartans did not allow sentiment to interfere with duty. Their focus was on maintaining control, and this meant keeping the helot population in constant fear. Historians record that once a year the Spartan government declared a formal war on the helots, allowing citizens to kill any who appeared rebellious without fear of religious pollution. This ritualistic cruelty served a political purpose. It reminded both conqueror and conquered of their places in the hierarchy. The wives of defeated warriors became symbols of this hierarchy. Some were placed in service within Spartan households. Others were used to repopulate territories under Spartan rule, ensuring loyalty and continuity. The Spartan state sometimes orchestrated marriages or forced unions designed to produce strong offspring who could be raised under Spartan discipline. These actions, while politically motivated, erased the personal freedoms of those involved. The state's obsession with strength left little room for compassion. Within Sparta itself, women occupied a unique position compared to the rest of Greece. Spartan women were trained in athletics, educated in state ideology, and expected to give birth to strong sons. They had more freedom and influence than their counterparts in Athens or Thebes. Yet this freedom came with its own kind of servitude. It was the servitude of purpose. Every aspect of Spartan life served one goal: the endurance of the state. In this system, the conquered women from other lands became living reminders of Sparta's dominance. Their labor sustained the Spartan way of life, while their suffering remained largely unseen. Centuries later, philosophers and historians would debate whether Sparta's system was admirable or monstrous. Some, like Xenophon, praised their discipline and equality among citizens. Others, like Aristotle, condemned the inhumanity of their social order, arguing that the cruelty toward helots and conquered peoples was a moral flaw that would eventually destroy Sparta from within. And indeed, it did. The same rigidity that had made Sparta strong would make it brittle when the world around it changed. But in the height of its power, Sparta seemed unbreakable. The soldiers trained in the agog, the harsh education system that turned boys into warriors, believed themselves the chosen defenders of Greece. They saw themselves as instruments of divine will, charged with maintaining balance and order through force. Every conquered city became proof of their destiny. Yet behind the discipline was fear, a fear that the enslaved helots might rise, that softness might creep into their ranks, that one generation might forget the cost of Spartan greatness. In the villages surrounding Sparta, the descendants of the defeated lived under constant watch. Their work fed the army that had conquered them. Stories of defiance were whispered, often ending in bloodshed. To keep control, Spartans employed secret police, the Crypteia, young men who roamed the countryside by night to eliminate potential rebels. It was both training and terror, a test of loyalty for the youth and a reminder of subjugation for the helots. Through this darkness, the myth of Spartan perfection endured. When we speak of what the Spartans did to the wives of defeated warriors, we are not merely recounting acts of cruelty, but examining a system where the individual meant nothing before the state. The women's fates were determined by political need, not mercy. Their lives became tools of survival for a society obsessed with control. They raised children who were not their own, labored in lands they no longer owned, and lived under the gaze of those who believed themselves superior by birth. Yet, in their endurance, they preserved fragments of humanity that the Spartan code sought to extinguish. Over time, as Sparta's wars expanded, the number of helots grew, and the balance between rulers and ruled shifted. Fear turned to paranoia. Even victorious soldiers began to question the price of their system. The Peloponnesian War tested every aspect of Spartan society. Though they defeated Athens, the victory brought exhaustion rather than glory. The rigid Spartan structure could not adapt to the complexities of empire. The conquered territories rebelled, the helots resisted, and the once mighty Spartan army began to fade. In later centuries, when travelers came to the ruins of Sparta, they found little left of its former grandeur. No great monuments, no temples adorned with gold, only scattered stones and fading legends. Yet the memory of what Sparta had done, both noble and terrible, endured. The city that once claimed to build the perfect warrior society had built instead a state that devoured itself from within. The silence of its fall echoed louder than the clamor of its victories. In the modern world, Sparta is often romanticized. Films, books, and speeches speak of its courage and heroism. The image of 300 warriors standing against thousands at Thermopylae inspires admiration. But the real Sparta was far more complex. Its glory was built upon layers of suffering, on the labor of the helots, the suppression of the weak, and the sacrifices of those who never had a choice. To understand Sparta is to confront the darker side of discipline and the danger of a society that values strength above compassion. The women left behind in the wake of Spartan conquest are rarely mentioned in history. Their voices are lost, their names forgotten. But their silent endurance shaped the generations that followed. Some adapted, finding ways to survive within the rigid structure of Spartan law. Others resisted quietly, preserving fragments of their culture through songs, rituals, and whispered stories passed to their children. These small acts of remembrance were forms of rebellion, defying the erasure that Sparta intended. Historians now see these women not as passive victims, but as witnesses to an age of extremes. Through them, we understand that power without empathy becomes its own kind of defeat. The Spartans believed they could control fate through discipline and order, but they could not control the human spirit. In time, the strength they worshipped became their weakness, and the voices they silenced became the truth that outlived them. In every civilization, there are stories that stand as warnings. Sparta's is one of them. It shows us that a society built entirely on conquest cannot escape the consequences of its own design. The treatment of the defeated, the way they are remembered or forgotten, reveals more about the victors than their battles ever could. For Sparta, the conquest of others was never enough. They had to conquer fear itself, yet fear became the very foundation of their world. As the centuries passed, the Spartan myth transformed. Philosophers turned their image into an ideal of stoic endurance. Generals studied their discipline. Rulers admired their unity. But beneath that myth, the human cost remained. The defeated families, the broken cities, the unending servitude, all were threads in the tapestry of Spartan greatness. To remember them is to restore balance to the story, to see not just the warriors but the world they shaped and destroyed. Today, when we look back at ancient Sparta, it is tempting to see them only as heroes or villains. Yet they were both and neither. Humans caught in a system of their own making. The wives of defeated warriors, whose suffering gave Sparta its strength, deserve to be remembered not as shadows in the background of history, but as the silent witnesses to a civilization that mistook domination for destiny. Their story is not one of revenge or retribution, but of endurance, the quiet, unyielding strength that outlasts even empires. The ruins of Sparta stand today as a lesson carved into stone and time. They remind us that greatness built on the suffering of others is never eternal. The legacy of Sparta is not its victories, but the questions it leaves behind. What is the cost of discipline without mercy? What becomes of a people who worship strength but forget compassion? And what do we owe to those whose pain built the foundations of glory? In the end, history's judgment is not written by the conquerors alone. It is written in the endurance of those who survived them. The wives of defeated warriors, nameless yet unforgettable, carry the true legacy of Sparta, not in triumph, but in truth. Their story reminds us that no empire, however powerful, can silence humanity forever. The unspeakable acts of the past cannot be erased, but in remembering them, we ensure they are never repeated.